The train whistle screamed across the flat land like a warning no one listened to anymore, and the man standing on the platform didn't flinch. Dust clung to his coat, his boots were worn thin at the heels, and his eyes looked like they had already seen the worst a man could live through and survive. People whispered his name when they thought he couldn't hear, and stayed quiet when he could. When the woman from the agency smiled and said there were 10 mail-order brides waiting to be chosen, all decent enough, all eager, all clean and hopeful, the cowboy didn't smile back. He looked past her, past the crowd, past the neat dresses and nervous hands, and then he said the words no one expected, words that would change every life on that platform forever. Give me the one no one wanted. The air went still. Somewhere, a baby cried. Even the wind seemed to pause, because in a world built on taking the best you could afford, this man had just asked for the forgotten. This wasn't a kindness people trusted. This was the start of something dangerous. He wasn't always this way. Once, years back, he had laughed easy and believed in good endings. Then the land took his family, the war took his brother, and the law took everything else it could reach. By the time he rode alone to this town, people only knew him as the quiet rancher who paid in cash and never stayed long. The agency woman cleared her throat and tried again, saying he deserved better, saying the unwanted girl was sickly, silent, strange, and already refused twice. The cowboy finally looked at her, really looked, and his voice stayed calm when he said he wasn't asking. He was choosing. From the edge of the platform, half hidden behind a crate, a young woman watched him with eyes that had learned not to hope. She had learned that hope hurt worse than hunger. Her dress was plain, her hands rough, and her name had been crossed out and written back in ink so many times it barely looked real anymore. She didn't step forward. She never did. But when his eyes met hers, something old and quiet moved between them, something that didn't need words. Later, people would say that was the moment fate stopped being polite. They tried to talk him out of it all the way to the paperwork table. They told him stories they thought would scare him. They said she didn't speak much. They said she had no family. They said she had no family. They said she had been passed from place to place like a burden nobody wanted to carry. The cowboy listened the way men do when they already know their answer. He signed his name slow and steady. When it was done, he stood and waited. No rush, no pride, just patience. The girl walked toward him like she expected the ground to vanish beneath her feet at any second. He tipped his hat, not smiling, not frowning, just acknowledging her as a person, something most folks had forgotten to do. "I'm Caleb," he said. She told him her name so softly he almost missed it. Anna. That was all. No promises, no speeches. Just two people standing in a world that hadn't been kind to either of them. The ride to the ranch took hours, and the silence stretched long between hoofbeats. He didn't push her to talk. He pointed out water when they passed it, warned her about the weather, and made sure she ate. Small things, careful things. At night, when they camped under the stars, she stayed wrapped in her blanket, eyes open, listening for danger. Caleb kept the fire low and sat with his back to her, so she could sleep without fear. This was not romance the way stories told it. This was trust built one brick at a time. Somewhere along that trail, Anna realized he wasn't testing her, wasn't waiting for her to fail. He had chosen her knowing exactly what the world thought of her, and that scared her more than rejection ever had. Men who expected nothing were rarer. Men who offered safety without demand were rarer still. When they reached the ranch, it wasn't grand. Just land, fences, cattle, and a house that had been repaired more than it had been built. He showed her where things were, gave her space, and said she could leave if she ever wanted to. That night, alone in a clean bed for the first time in years, Anna cried without sound, because being unwanted had been easier than being chosen without a reason she could understand. Out on the porch, Caleb watched the moon rise over the fields and wondered if he had finally done one good thing in a life full of hard choices. He didn't know yet that the town would notice. He didn't know the past would come looking, and he didn't know that the girl no one wanted would become the one thing he would fight the world to protect. On the Old West Cowboy channel, they say every legend starts with a quiet moment nobody paid attention to. This was that moment. The town noticed sooner than Caleb expected. By the second week, word had already crawled its way from the feed store to the saloon, twisting itself uglier with every retelling. Folks said the quiet rancher had taken in a broken girl, that something must be wrong with her if no man wanted her, that he must be desperate or foolish or worse. Anna felt those looks before she heard the words. They followed her like dust when she stepped into town, eyes pausing too long, voices dropping just enough to sting. She kept her head down, hands folded, moving the way someone moves when they are used to staying invisible. Caleb noticed everything, even when he pretended not to. He didn't defend her with words. He did it with presence. He stood close. He paid fair. He looked men in the eye until they remembered how to behave. At the ranch, Anna worked hard, harder than anyone expected. She learned the animals, the fences, the rhythm of the land. She woke before dawn and slept only when her body could not hold her up anymore. She spoke little, but when she did, her words were careful and honest. Caleb never rushed her, never corrected her unless it mattered. Slowly, the house stopped feeling empty. A cup left on the table, bread cooling by the window, a soft hum when she thought she was alone. These were small changes, but to a man who had lived with silence for years, they were louder than gunfire. At night, they talked by the fire, not about the past, but about weather, cattle, and what tomorrow might need. It was safer that way. The past had teeth. One afternoon, trouble rode in without knocking. 3 men from town came up the drive, their smiles thin and curious. They joked too loudly, asked too many questions, and looked at Anna like she was something owed to them. Caleb stepped between them without raising his voice. He said this was private land. He said business was done in town. One of the men laughed and said a woman like her should be grateful for attention. The silence that followed was heavy. Caleb's hand rested near his belt, not threatening, just ready. He didn't shout, he didn't boast. He told them to leave. They did, but not without promises muttered under their breath. That night, Anna sat shaking by the fire, convinced she had brought danger with her. Caleb told her the danger had always been there. It just finally showed its face. The past came riding in too, quieter but sharper. A letter arrived with the seal of the agency asking questions, asking why the unwanted girl was suddenly off the list. They wanted confirmation, records, explanations. Anna stared at the paper like it might bite her. Caleb burned it in the stove and said they owed nobody anything. That was the night she finally told him pieces of her story, not all of it, just enough. About moving from place to place. About being useful but never chosen. About learning to expect nothing so disappointment wouldn't crush her. He listened without interrupting, without pity. When she finished, he nodded once and said she was safe here. It wasn't a promise filled with poetry. It was better. It was true. The town didn't stop watching. It tested them instead. Prices rose. Help disappeared. Fences were cut in the night. Once a stone shattered a window while they slept. Anna blamed herself every time. Caleb never did. He fixed what broke. He stood guard when needed. And slowly, without noticing, Anna began to stand too. She stopped flinching at loud voices. She met eyes. She learned where the rifle was kept and how to use it. The girl who had arrived expecting nothing was changing, not into something loud or hard, but into someone solid. Someone who knew her place wasn't borrowed anymore. One evening, as the sun bled red across the fields, Caleb admitted something he hadn't said out loud yet. He told her he had chosen her because he knew what it meant to be left behind. Because the land didn't care who you were before, only what you did next. Anna listened, heart pounding, and for the first time allowed herself to believe this wasn't charity. This was choice. Out beyond the fence, the town lights flickered, watching, waiting. On the Old West Cowboy channel, stories often say love arrives loud and fast. This one didn't. It grew quiet and dangerous, the kind that made enemies nervous. And somewhere in the dark, the people who believed Anna was still unwanted began planning how to take back what they thought didn't belong to her. The trouble didn't announce itself this time. It crept in on a calm morning when the sky was too blue and the air too still, the kind of day that usually meant good work and no surprises. Caleb was out checking the north fence when the first shot cracked through the quiet. It wasn't meant to hit him, it was meant to send a message. The cattle spooked, dust exploded into the air, and by the time he reached the house, Anna was already standing on the porch, with a rifle in her hands, face pale but steady. That alone told him how far she'd come. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. He took position. She stayed close. The ranch that had slowly become a home was now a line in the dirt that someone wanted to cross. By noon, the town's men rode in openly. Not the drunks this time, but the ones who hid behind smiles and rules. They said there were complaints. They said there were questions about the marriage, about legality, about ownership. They said a woman like Anna couldn't just disappear from records. Their words were polite, but their eyes weren't. Anna felt the old fear clawing back, telling her she had been foolish to believe in safety. Caleb listened until they were done, then spoke in a voice so calm it made people uneasy. He said she was his wife by law and by choice. He said the land was his, paid for, defended, and not open for debate. When one man suggested Anna return to town until matters were sorted, Caleb stepped forward and the space between them vanished. No shouting, no threats, just a truth laid bare. She wasn't going anywhere. That night, Anna couldn't sleep. The old voices were loud again, telling her she was the problem, that life was simpler when she was unwanted and unseen. She sat at the table until dawn, fingers wrapped around a cold cup, staring at nothing. When Caleb found her, she finally said what had been growing inside her chest for weeks. She said she would leave if it kept him safe. She said she had done it before. She could do it again. Caleb's jaw tightened, not in anger, but in hurt. He told her she didn't get to decide her worth anymore. He told her she didn't get to decide her worth anymore. He told her he didn't choose her to lose her. He chose her to stand with him. The words broke something open inside her that had been sealed shut for years. The attack came 2 nights later. No warnings this time. Fire in the grass. Shadows moving fast. A shot too close to the house. Caleb moved like instinct and experience, covering angles, shouting orders. Anna followed without thinking. Fear was there, but it didn't own her anymore. She fired when she had to. She held her ground when she wanted to run. When it was over, the night smelled like smoke and regret. 1 man was injured. The rest fled, taking their courage with them. By morning, the sheriff arrived, slower than he should have been, but not blind. He looked at the damage, the tracks, the fear still hanging in the air. He didn't ask many questions. He didn't need to. Some lines, once crossed, spoke for themselves. Word spread differently after that, not as gossip, but as caution. The ranch wasn't easy prey. The woman wasn't weak. And the cowboy wasn't alone. Anna felt the shift before she saw it. People in town nodded instead of staring. Prices steadied. Help returned. Not kindness, not yet, but respect. That night, sitting on the porch wrapped in a blanket, Anna realized something that made her chest ache. She wasn't surviving anymore. She was living. The unwanted girl had become the woman who stayed. Caleb watched her laugh quietly at something small, and the weight he'd carried for years eased just enough to let him breathe. He didn't know what the future held. He only knew this land, this woman, and this fight were worth everything he had. On the Old West Cowboy channel, stories often end with gunfire and victory. This one wasn't finished yet, because the hardest part wasn't defending the ranch. It was believing that what they had built could last. Morning came soft after the violence, like the land itself was giving them a chance to decide who they were going to be now. The smoke cleared, the grass stopped smoldering, and the ranch stood where it always had, scarred but standing. Anna walked the fence line with Caleb, her steps sure, her eyes no longer searching for escape routes. When they reached the far post, she stopped and rested her hand on the wood, feeling its rough strength beneath her palm. For the first time in her life, she understood something simple and powerful. No one was coming to take her away. Not quietly, not easily, not at all. The town changed slowly, the way people do when pride gets tired. The men who had ridden out against them avoided eye contact now. The women watched Anna with curiosity instead of judgment. A few even smiled. When Anna stepped into the store, the room didn't go silent anymore. She spoke when spoken to. She laughed when she felt like it. She had learned that being chosen once was not luck. It was a beginning. Caleb noticed how she stood taller, how her voice didn't shake, how the land seemed to recognize her as its own. He had asked for the one no one wanted, and the world had been wrong about her in every possible way. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky gold, Caleb told her the truth he'd never said out loud. He said he chose her because he believed the unwanted carried a kind of strength others never learned. Because when someone had nothing, they learned how to build everything from scratch. Anna listened, eyes wet, heart steady. She told him she stayed not because she was afraid to leave, but because she wanted to. Those words settled between them like a promise neither of them needed to write down. The ranch grew busier. The fences stood straighter. The house felt warmer. Laughter found its way into rooms that had only known quiet. When trouble passed nearby, it passed them by. Not because they were feared, but because they were known. Anna became the woman people asked for, the one who saw clearly, spoke honestly, and never forgot where she came from. Caleb became something new, too. Not just a lone rancher, but a man who had built a life by choosing differently. Years later, travelers would ask how it all started, and the story always came back to the same moment. A dusty platform. 10 choices laid out neat and easy, and one cowboy who looked past all of it and said, "Give me the one no one wanted." On the Old West Cowboy channel, they say legends aren't born from taking what everyone wants. They're born from seeing value where others see none. This was one of those legends. And it didn't end with a gunshot. It ended with a home.